Good morning, everyone. We will begin this meeting of the State Route 85 Policy Advisory Board for September the 24th. And we do not have a quorum at this time, so we will be meeting as a body at large. But we will take a roll call, please.
Here.
Member Sings?
Here.
Member Bruins? Here. Member Jensen? Alternate Saya? Member Turner? Member Camus? Member Klein? Alternate Fong? Vice Chairperson Miller?
Here.
Chairperson McAllister?
Here.
Ex-Officio Rivera? Alternate Ex-Officio Saleh? Your meeting is committee of the whole, sir.
Okay. So thank for my board members for being here. Thank you for the public to attend. This is one of the issues that we seem to have a problem with. The VTA is trying to get everybody to commit to their obligations that they swore to. So we only have one action item, but we will hold that off. But otherwise, we will begin, and we will take public presentations at this time. So this portion of the agenda is reserved for persons desiring to address the committee on any matters not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes. The law does not permit committee action or extend discussion on any item not on the agenda except under special circumstances. If committee action is requested, the matter can be placed on a subsequent agenda. All statements that require response will be referred to staff or replied in writing. Seeing none from the public, thank you, Roland. Please continue.
So I think some of you were at the workshop last Friday, and I don't know if you had the opportunity of watching the video, but it was beyond atrocious. You couldn't hear what people were saying or anything. I don't even know why we bother to spend all this money recording these meetings. So moving forward, I think any future VTA workshop meeting should be held in the city of Cupertino City Hall.
Thank you. We will take that up for the city of Cupertino. Okay, and anybody else would like to take this opportunity to make any comments that are not on the agenda?
So, John, on that item, we should just ask staff to listen to the tape to see if it is unintelligible, because there could be a process improvement there at VTA to make sure that we fix that in the future.
We will be happy to look at that, Mr. Chairman, though I will mention that that is not under the purview of this particular board.
Well, we've been known to go
But
far.
we'll do it anyway.
But for the benefit of the community, I think it's, yes, just. Okay, we will do orders of the day. Does anybody like to change the orders of the day? Seeing none, we will continue on to receive committee staff reports.
There's no report today from staff. We'll just go right to the information items.
Wow, okay. Then consent agenda, we will wait. Hopefully we will have a quorum before we can do that one. But then we will go on to the regular agenda. And item 6, receive an update on the SR 85 noise reduction program.
And this item will be presented by Gene Gonzalo.
Good morning. Thanks. Morning, board members. Gene Gonzalo, VTA Capital Program Manager. I'm here to provide an update on the SR 85 noise reduction study. This study was initiated back in August 2015. It was to be implemented in 3 phases. Phase 1 was just a study of the corridor. Phase 2 was to implement some of the findings in the study as pilot projects in different locations along the corridor. And a third phase would be to implement the successful findings at locations where needed. The study was completed in September of 2016, and we were supposed to go to phase 2 soon after with Measure B, 2016 Measure B funds. However, because of the litigation, that process was delayed for the next couple of years. We did find 5 test locations as part of the noise study. And I'll show you that in the next map. But as part of the study, the corridor pavement was seen as the best strategy to implement. And this was an overlay of with asphalt concrete. Other strategies looked at were micro grinding of the existing pavement, noise barrier caps on top of the sound walls, the existing sound walls, sound wall barrier or noise wall surface treatments, like absorptive treatments, was also looked into. So the study seen on the map showed 5 locations kind of spread out along the corridor based on different topography, different types of pavement, and all these locations have existing sound walls. So it would either be a pavement overlay or other treatment. The big question is how soon can we implement this project now with Measure B being available? I think the Measure B funds were released earlier this year. The capital program have been working on a lot of projects, including highway projects. So this one is coming up. We've had preliminary discussions with Caltrans on the implementation of this project. Some of the issues that they've already brought up on the overlays were, long-term maintenance of overlays, and also putting overlays on perfectly good concrete pavement. So that's something we'll be discussing as we develop this project. But as you can see, we'll be bringing on a design consultant to start this work. We hope to award this contract later this year or early next year, and then start the process with Caltrans. Some of these are kind of your standard timeframes with Caltrans. We will work with them to try to expedite these processes, since the work is not complex. It's not like an interchange or really requires detailed design. So we'll see what we can do to reduce the timeframes on some of these. But the way it is right now, we won't be able to put out anything for construction until 2021. So anyway, these are the next steps. As I stated, we'll formally meet with Caltrans to discuss the noise reduction with our consultant after we put out a request for a proposal for professional services. Also, we'll have to enter into a cooperative agreement with Caltrans for their review and approval, since it is on the state highway, for the implementation of phase 2. The detailed steps are in your board memo. I'm not going to go over them, but if there aren't any questions, I'm happy to answer them now.
Any questions from the board? Yes, ma'am, Susan.
Excuse me here, I'm a little sick. This is somewhat related to noise. When Highway 85 was built, they took out a lot of trees all along the corridor, and there was a mitigation requirement to replace those, partially for air quality and partially for noise reduction. Where are those numbers? Who's documenting it, and who's been tracking? The reason I'm asking is 90-something, the children's shelter went in on Union, and they planted trees that we actually moved an oak tree from Highway 85. We spent $10,000 to move an oak tree. That tree died, we replaced it. That tree now is being proposed to be removed by the Harker School project. City of San Jose didn't even know it was a mitigation tree from Highway 85. And it brought to my attention, who is tracking how many of these have either been planted and died or taken down? because to me, part of noise reduction is the tree canopy and what it can absorb, not only just the air quality. And so I was very shocked that San Jose didn't even know that tree, specifically that one tree, which it was a 96-inch box tree when it was transplanted, is not even counted anywhere on mitigation for Highway 85. So where are these numbers? How are we tracking? And what are we going to do as we move forward as more and more things get built along this corridor?
I can look into that, but I think after the trees are planted, the mitigation is met. If another project comes in to remove it, it is that project's environmental document requirement to mitigate that removal if there is a mitigation for that project. But
They don't even, the EIR doesn't even state it was a mitigation replacement tree to start with.
Yeah.
And they show a 1-to-1 replacement for a 35-foot wide canopy tree. So I'm just, if this is one specific incident, how many of these along the corridor are happening, and how does that, compound the noise problem? So that's, I would like to know what's going on, tracking and maintaining and monitoring. Thank you.
Director Bruins?
Okay, I need a little refresher here. So all 5 of these locations for the pilot, they're all pavement treatments?
No, they are just locations to implement any strategies that we feel it will
Okay,
work.
so we have not determined what strategies we're using on each of these 5, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and so when I look at the timeline then, I'm trying to understand what is the long pole on this? Is it trying to determine which is appropriate for each one of these?
That's the first part, and that we would work with Caltrans to determine which strategy would be implemented. And then there would be the environmental clearance of those strategies.
Okay, and so each of these are going to be, we're going to clear all 5 of these strategies?
Yes, it'll be one project.
In one project?
Yes.
Okay. And then the ones that are drawing the most concern are which of the strategies?
I'm not sure what you
So
mean by
is it, you mentioned, it sounded like you mentioned some overlay concerns, so that's the pavement piece. Is there also questionings in terms of any of the sound wall type of remedies that we're testing?
It's some of the issues with the sound wall barrier caps could be if the existing walls are structurally sufficient to support additional height on top of them. Now these barrier caps could be lightweight material because they're not actually sound wall additions. There are different shapes to reflect noise away from the wall, instead of kind of bending over the wall type of thing. So those are going to be looked at. One of the things we'll have our consultant do is review the previous study just to verify some of the cost and some of the strategies.
Okay, and so it's a study that we're actually embarking on hopefully in early 2020.
It's more of this project to implement the test, but we're not going to look at any more strategies to implement.
Okay.
Those have been already looked at.
Yeah, it just seems like such a long road to get us to these pilots. And so I would appreciate anything that Caltrans can do and VTA can do to try and make some of this put in place sooner rather than later. This has been,
Sure.
It's a lot of talk, and, if we can expedite this, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Some of this has been going on for quite a long time. And as we went through the whole engineering process, the analysis of noise out there, it's very well known that a pavement, a tire on road produces a certain amount of acoustic energy. And your choices on that, unfortunately, trees do not absorb that much acoustic energy. They do look nice, though. You can put caps on the sound wall which change the dispersion pattern, but the fundamental root cause is always the energy. And we've had this discussion at past not PAC meetings, but or PAC meetings and at board meetings, right? We can talk about all these different items, but really what you need to do is change the source noise, which is pavement. And I actually thought 2 years ago we had decided that we were going to do the pavement overlay. And it's very interesting because nothing has really changed in the project, and I am seeing the mighty VTA with the potential of having to do test pavement of about a half mile. I get it, it's 5 different sections on the freeway, showing me a 4-year project to do a half mile of overlay pavement on a substrate which is known to be good because Highway 85 is a pretty high quality road out there, and over half of this we don't even allow trucks. So it is in very good shape. I actually think that something's gone awry in the whole process. Somewhere I thought we already decided pavement, though there are some places in my city where I think caps might be somewhat effective, but I thought we'd already made certain decisions. I feel like we're remaking decisions. And the second thing is just process-wise, I just do not understand how we can spend 4 years to do less than a mile of pavement. That's not the productivity that I've seen out of this organization in the past. We've done whole connectors and interchanges in less than a year. When we looked at the whole 85, 17 didn't line up right? Went down to 2 lanes. It was like a year and a half long to build that whole giant structure. When we decided there wasn't the fence down the barrier down the middle of Highway 85, we did that whole thing in less than a year. This is 10 times easier, 100 times easier than some of the projects I just mentioned. And we're looking at 4 years on something that's been discussed for the last 10, that's been part of the ballot measure for the last 3 years, and it was part of the 2014 dry run at the ballot measure. So I really got a question. I know Jeannie was trying to get some specifics, but I would appreciate if there was a way to relook at this in the context of the decisions that have already been made, or presumably had already been made. Maybe I'm totally missing it. And again, it is unfathomable that an organization with this capability and this track record is going to take 4 years to drop a little tiny bit of pavement on a 17-mile stretch of the freeway. There wasn't a question in that. I'm sorry, Gene. But I do appreciate that you're here and that we're working on this. I just want to see what we do with this question. Oh, the question was, how you doing today, Gene?
Good. I just want to add one thing on overlays that we had with our initial discussions with Caltrans is that the overlays, over time, they deteriorate, so they require maintenance. And that's one of the things that we would have to consider moving forward. It would reduce noise, there's no question about that, there's no argument. But 4 or 5 years down the line, we're putting overlay over perfectly good concrete pavement, and to do that, we might be we might need to settle that pavement with what they call crack and seat, so that the joints and the grooves between the pavement slabs don't rise up to the AC. But given that and the continuous overlay of AC versus concrete, they're not doing any maintenance at all. So that's something that's going to come back to us, and will VTA be responsible for maintaining that AC that we put in? So that's a question that needs to be discussed with them. So there's other things. It's not so simple as putting an overlay over a pavement.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, we
Yes.
certainly appreciate the committee's frustration with the length of time that's been involved. There have been delays to this, as you are all well aware, and I do appreciate the nice words that Member Miller spoke about our awesome ability to get things done. We have, what Gene has laid out for you is a reasonable approach based upon the regulations and the complexity of the project. I can assure you that we will endeavor to do our best, working with our friends at Caltrain, to deliver as quickly as we possibly can. Thank you.
Yes.
So I guess what I want to make sure I mean, it's frustrating, right?
I'd like to make comments too,
Yeah,
but
but
I'm
the
wondering if
question-
we're in question period or comment period, because we haven't heard from the
We're
public
still
yet.
in question.
My question is one that I think we need to be asking of Caltrans, and that is, I appreciate this concern about the overlay, but are we using a lens? I should be looking over here, I know, but I'm looking at you because you're the speaker. Are we using a lens that we apply to our highways where we have major truck traffic, et cetera? Because the point that Mr. Miller raised, shouldn't be lost upon us in terms of this is not like the 101 and Highway 5 and 99 and et cetera. So if we can make sure that Caltrans is using the lens that's appropriate for 85.
Yes, I think it was 2 years ago, Caltrans did an overlay on 85, south of 87. I'm not sure if anybody remembers that. So they do work on 85 also for pavement. And that section of 85 is actually asphalt concrete. So from 87 to south to 101 in South San Jose, that's AC pavement. But the rest of 85 all the way to Mountain View is Portland cement concrete.
So, did you have a response?
No, go ahead, and I could make some comments after.
Okay, so
some remark because it keeps.
I'm going to finish with a question or two. Since this project we saw 2 years ago, 3 years potentially ago, would you be able to send us in a memo the initial study and the criteria so that we get up to speed again, because it's been taking a little bit of time?
Yes.
Okay, because that would be because.
You mean the noise study?
Yeah, and why, why you picked those 5 areas?
Yeah,
what noise levels triggered it to say, well, we picked these areas and the AC, so forth like that? Okay, that would be appreciated. So if you do that, that will take care of all my questions for a while. Was there anybody from the public would like to make a public comment on that? And then I was going to bring this back to the board for comments. 2? Did you guys fill out a blue card? You need to fill out a blue card if you'd like to make comments on this? Yeah, you can come up here and speak, but just for efficient, we can do that. Then we'll come back, and then Mr. Sinks will have some comments, and then we will all have our comments. But while they're doing that, yeah, just fill that out later. So,
I agree with Mr. Miller, Councilman Miller here about the long schedule. I mean, some of the activities on that schedule are a year length to do certain things, which seems unfathomable, especially if you're in the private sector. However, I'd like to point out that I think it was about 2014, which is about 5 years ago, Caltrans recommended express lanes on Highway 85, and you guys had managed to squander away about half a decade discussing what to do, and you're going to come back to the exact same thing. Thank you, Councilman Camus, for laughing. So this seems to be a problem with government bodies trying to obfuscate what goes on. Just build those express lanes and let whoever needs to use it now. Thank you.
thank you.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Ron Shirley. I work for the city of Cupertino. I'm the Director of Public Works. Just a couple of questions regarding what is being planned on 85. So I'm not familiar with the ballot language that was presented back in the day, but so it sounds like noise abatement was one of the issues on the ballot, as well as any transit improvements. So I'm just curious as to how the noise was prioritized relative to the transit improvements, really for fear that a lot of dollars are going to ultimately be expended on these noise improvements, and how does that become more of a priority than the transit improvements themselves, which I know is a later agenda item. That's a concern, because I didn't see anything in the staff report that talked about the cost of these noise abatements ultimately, and how that's going to draw down funds for what are certainly going to be some fairly expensive transit improvements. I was also curious if the noise that we're being abated, are we exceeding some threshold that's been established, and we're just exceeding it, and that's why we're abating it, or what exactly is the numerics as to why this project is needed? was another. And then, the surface, as it was stated, most of it is Portland concrete, and it's been grooved with a diamond blade. And in my mind, a lot of that is to abate noise itself, because it gives that energy that can be absorbed into the voids that are created by the grooves underneath the tires. And that does provide a very reasonable way to reduce the noise on that surface. I'm not aware of an asphalt surface that you would put over that would be less, that would cause less noise. Perhaps some rubber asphalt that is more of a gap graded type of a thing would help absorb some of the noise. But I mean, what's out there, my point is quite effective, and it is perfectly good material. And it would be a shame, it's problematic to put asphalt on top of concrete and expect it to hold up very well, unless you put a lot of asphalt on top of concrete. It's very difficult to put a thin layer of asphalt over concrete and expect it to hold up. So I would really caution against doing that unless you're prepared to put a lot of asphalt. And again, I don't know why you would do that. So it seems that if you are attenuating the noise, to do something with the sound walls, if those commitments were made in the ballot and it is decided that trumps the importance of the transit improvements, that you look at the sound barriers first.
Maybe you would like to meet with Gene afterwards and also get that sound report, would be helpful for you. And I saw what the third person would like to speak. 3 more. Come on up. Please come up. We just remind everybody you have 2 minutes.
So briefly, to share my experience with noise and Highway 85, I guess I live about 1 mile away from it, and I'm in the section where we don't have concrete, where we've got asphalt, between Highway 87 and Highway 101 in the south. What I find very interesting is that when I'm inside my house, I'm downstairs, I can't hear the freeway. However, sit down, I can hear the light rail, which doesn't make any sense. And the light rail is not noisy, it's actually very pleasant. I just can hear it. I just know the light rail is going through, I can hear it. But going back to the point that you made about trees, I live right against the foothill. I can cross the street and to Santa Teresa Park, start climbing. The moment I'm above the trees, I can hear the freeway, and the noise is just unbelievable, and I'm 1 mile from it. That's my personal experience.
And next person, please.
Hi, I'm Heidi Owens. I'm a candidate for town council for Los Gatos. Again, I'm disappointed our Los Gatos representatives aren't here. I wanted to echo the comment that noise has not been a complaint I've heard from our residents when I'm out canvassing and talking with them. There are a lot of other things they talk about, noise I haven't heard. And then I wanted to echo Chair McAllister's request to have the actual sound samples that were produced publicized, but in addition to providing those to you, could you also post those on the website and make them publicly available so that I can see them, because I'm not on the committee here. That's it, thank you.
To the point of publishing, does the ad hoc have its own little page, and could we add that to that particular one?
Yeah, we could certainly add, put this document up online.
And would it be under the PAB 85?
Sure, we would put it under Highway 85 and do the sound study. Sure.
Okay.
Good idea.
Thank you. Thank you.
It would be under the project section and not the committee section.
Yeah, the project section of Highway 85.
Okay,
Yeah.
just make sure we, okay.
Yeah, it'll be up there.
Okay.
My name is Mayor Levy. I'm one of the living behind the freeway. There are 3 things that I like to ask. Have you considered rubberized asphalt? Gene, I'd like to ask that. Also, European, Japanese, and South Korean, where the public density, the density around the freeway is much higher than that. So they have a lot of expertise in that area in noise mitigation. I was wondering if VTA is consulting with them too, to save us a lot of time, a lot of expenses, and everything else. Now, another in terms of noise mitigation, I've surfed it, and I think I forwarded it to Howard too. I've seen some clever ways of reducing the noise by putting solar panels 45-degree along the freeway, which does two things: generate electricity, more revenue for the city, and also deflect the noise. So I think we should consider that too. Putting, just hanging on three of them or four of them along the wall, 45-degree, deflecting it up there. So this is something that I would encourage VTA to look into it. In fact, I called one of the solar panel companies, and I asked them if they would consider it. Said, we would love to do that. So win-win situation. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So, does anybody else would like to do a public comment on this? Otherwise, we will close this and bring this back to the board for discussion and comments. Mr. Sinks?
Thank you very much. I'd like to know if the PAB has come to any determination as a body on how much money we spend on sound mitigation versus transit improvements or other transportation improvements.
In terms of with this body has made a decision how they'd like to how they recommend?
Allocate the $350 million that we secured through Measure B.
Sure. So in VTA's capital or in their 2-year budget, there is money set aside for 85 projects, but I don't believe it was differentiated between future moving forward. So that's something the PAB could talk about in the future if it'd like. But there was. For the next 2 years, it was budgeted how much money would be spent on the study as well as on the noise program.
Right, but I don't. To my recollection, correct me if I'm wrong. We haven't had that debate. I am concerned about two things. One is, what Roger Lee, our Public Works Director, well-esteemed Public Works Director, said. Right? Are we doing something that's effective? My second concern is how much money are we putting into this, and can we have a debate relative to whether we want to put, the proportion of the funding that we have available into transportation measures as opposed to noise mitigation. If what I heard today is true, and we already have fairly effective road surfacing for the purpose of noise, gosh, maybe we ought to consider other mitigation measures. I don't know. Solar panels sound cool. I don't know if they have a effect. How much have we budgeted so far for the activities on your slide? What are we anticipating all that to cost? In other words, how much, if that's the only thing we ever get done, how much are we going to draw down that 350?
So far, the study has cost $250,000.
Right. So
phase two,
for these follow-on activities, what are we looking at?
The estimate to complete the pilot projects is in the range of up to $10 million.
Okay.
That's I think in the report it identified maybe 6.5, but with a lot of overtime, escalation, and higher cost. We're just bumping it up to 10 million.
So, thank you. So my comment to this body is, are we doing through this work something that is in fact sustainable and efficacious, or are we taking some significant portion? This is just a pilot. If we were to then go forward and do it for the whole roadway, I could imagine we might be spending a lot of money on noise reduction to not get a lot of value. When we did Measure B, Jeannie knows this, John knows this, Howard knows this, there was a balance of interest between cities that said, I just want a quieter roadway, and others saying, no, we need a transit solution. And so what I would say is, let's take the time to make sure that we are doing pilots that are effective and that are proven to work, not just because we want to say we've done some pilot mitigation. And before we spend any more significant money on this effort, I would really like to have this body deliberate on what sort of allocation we want going to transportation improvements as opposed to noise mitigation. I recognize we're going to do some noise mitigation because A, that was in the measure that we promised voters, but we also promised them a transportation solution. And frankly, we don't have a lot of money, and I think there are forces at work that may want to go find, repurpose it, quite frankly. And so I'd be interested in having that at discussion, particularly at a time where we know what the transportation improvements would cost, we know what the noise improvements that are efficacious would cost, and we could come to some determination to make a recommendation to the board. So that's where I'm coming from on this. Thank you.
I guess we could probably get a better understanding once the RFP's been presented, so for cost-wise.
Yeah, certainly. I think once we find out how much it would cost, and then also once we complete the other study as well that you'll hear about in your next item, which talks about potential projects for how much money we're talking about for what a transit project might be as well.
Okay. I just wanted to follow up a few questions. So where's these 5 project pilot areas? That's where the money is going to go for the, and then are they really pilot projects or the total extent of, because when I hear pilot project means, okay, we're going to test these areas, and then that means it's going to expand to other areas or not. So what's your game plan after those 5 pilot areas are done?
Right. So actually, before and after the projects, we will be doing noise studies. So before we even implement any of these, we're going to do readings at those locations. And once those strategies are implemented, then we'll do follow-up noise studies. And these are to verify that they're actually providing the noise reduction that we were expecting. Now, it could be that they're not providing as much as we thought. And then that would mean we don't proceed with those strategies. But if they are successful, then the next step would be, I think it would be for communities who are complaining about noise to submit proposals or requests. We're not just going to do the whole corridor. That's unreasonable. It's just locations, I think, where this is how we're anticipating it. Locations where there are further complaints, we would implement those successful strategies. And those would be areas where there are existing walls. But if there are no existing walls there and there's noise complaints, I don't think there's anything we can do.
Okay. I'm going to jump on a limb here, and when I see the item number 1 in Mountain View, so will that be your number 1 priority and work in that city first?
Well, we got 5 locations, so they're all going to be implemented at the same time.
Well, no, I'm just, okay, because, Dawn, pay attention to this one. So let me,
I want to...
yeah, jump, if you got some clarification, go for it,
Yes,
please.
thank you so much. I don't know how to operate that thing. Is it working or I have to push? Is it good? The microphone, okay. I just want to clarify a couple of things about this, the noise study that VTA has been done, a feasibility study, and they proposed a few innovative approaches how to reduce the noise through 85. So far, actually, we've been, I think we met with VTA. It is just to focus on the project schedule and how to deal with it. Moving forward, I think it's an innovative approach how to, I think VTA and Caltrans come up with a way to reduce the noise, given the fact there's other factors contribute to this, what is the best mitigation, which is, I think maintenance is a major concern. We cannot put something in the pavement and go back in 2 years and have another project to fix the mitigation. And I do appreciate the comment from Public Works Director of Cupertino. It does have, I think Caltrans, we haven't done a lot of projects that we lay down 1 inch of asphalt on top of a good shape concrete asphalt, concrete pavement. It does have a concern. It does not provide, I think, I'm not in conclusion, but we need to analyze the sustainability, the maintenance of it, and also who's going to maintain this kind of things. So it's all been actually innovative approaches, and Caltrans will work with VTA to make sure whatever we choose is sustainable and actually it does not cost a lot more than to maintain it than the value brings. So this one, actually, the schedule that was presented, it just as a high-level approach. Caltrans, we haven't seen anything yet as in paper other than a high-level discussion with VTA. They haven't had a consultant on board to do this. So it's not actually, the schedule, again, is that long. It is just, this is the nature, as Jim said, how long it takes to get things. But we committed to work with VTA on a schedule, accelerated schedule. But the most important thing is what is actually Caltrans and VTA recommended to put down on the road. It is sustainable and maintainable. Thanks.
Thank you for that update. So that brings the other question is, you had an alternative, which was caps on existing sound walls, which then would take care of that maintenance going down. So do you have a strategy that, with that in mind, that maybe we'll put on some caps in some places and asphalt down on others?
That's what our consultant would look into. Yeah, I can't say right now. Like I said, there's the structural issues, and they'll have to do the research on what caps are available out in the market and see what. We'll have to go to Caltrans because they are owners of the walls, and if we're attaching anything to that, they would have to approve that. So it's one of the strategies we'll have our consultant be investigating in more detail.
So when you did the sound study, just to give me some background, that it was, you found the spots that there was noise based on the criteria that was established at that time, and then, but no solutions were recommended at that time? Well, you had two recommended.
Yeah.
And were they then not vetted through, or were they vetted through in that sound report?
Our consultant for the study was a noise consultant. They were not an engineering firm. So they did research on what's out there, but they didn't go into, the budget wasn't enough to really go into structural detail or anything like that, or maintenance costs.
Okay. I just want to follow up on a question that Susan had that Johnny's going to ask. I live on an area, I hear 85 noise, and we have a lot of trees. And I don't know what Howard was saying, that trees don't mitigate sound, but my experience, they have mitigated sound before. So if you can get an answer for Mr. Camus and Susan, that would be great. But I do believe we have a thing called Stevens Creek Trail, and the sound wall is south of that. So all I do is get the trees, which does help and also knocks out the sound. So, yeah. So what's your thought on the trees? Do they help?
That's a common, I guess, statement that landscaping do not block noise, but they could introduce different kinds of noises that would change the noise of the freeway, or you know, the leaves moving around could be different noise that could maybe mask the freeway sound. But yeah, it's still there. It's just there's other ambient noise that you can hear along with it that makes it more pleasant, I guess.
So when you were saying cities could suggest other projects, Mountain View could come along and said, hey, we'd like to propose that you guys put in XYZ or do something along this line?
As long as it's not a new sound wall, yeah.
Oh, right. How about berms? You know, we're moving a lot of earth these days. Just
berms?
Yeah.
Yeah, berms usually require lots of right-of-way. I mean, they have to slope up, so it's usually not a lot of right-of-way along 85.
Okay. Yeah, so I'd just like to echo the comments of the rest of my board members that it's frustrating because I still get people from our neighborhood, Lupchik area, that they're constantly asking about the noise. And, you know, this was 2014 was initially, and Johnny Camus, I will let him say I told you so earlier next. Yeah, this seems to be taking a rather long time. Will this require, I mean, let's say we want this expedited, or to Councilmember Singh's point, would we bond for money for this to get it done sooner, or would this be in the big project of Measure B money all the way down?
Well, for the test pilot project, I think there's already money appropriated in the 2021 budget that the board approved. I believe there's a $12 million allocation. Some going to the study, and some going to the transit study, and some going to the noise
Actual
reduction.
construction.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody other comments? Okay, we'll start with on the right.
Howard, I tend to disagree with you that trees don't do a whole lot. Otherwise, why would these projects require these mitigation numbers? Also, I have worked on Caltrans projects as a landscape architect, and you stick a little hole in the bottom of the wall and you put the plant on the one side and the vine grows up on the freeway side, and believe me, the sound attenuation changes because the landscaping absorbs some, whether minute number or big number, the vines on the walls help absorb the sound and changes the sound, like you were saying, depending on the tree canopy and the leaves rustling. There are changes to the sound. There's also, they are multifunctional in the sense that they're dealing with sound, they're dealing with air quality, they're dealing with the heat island effect. So to me, asphalt paving over concrete is going to be a long-term maintenance problem, as we've been hearing being said here. They're just not necessarily long-term compatibility between the two of them. And I'm surprised that in the sound discussion that there was no structural evaluation of these walls, but that caps are being proposed. How can that happen? I like the idea of looking at things like solar panels on the top, because then again, it's multifunctional. We're not just solving one problem. We're trying to solve, with the limited dollars, solve multiple problems. So I am concerned about the schedule. I'm concerned about these budgets. I'm concerned about some of the background data being missing if we don't have these sound reports, but we're, where's this data keep going? And it's like the one woman said, can you post it online? Where can we find this? So this continues to be a problem for me, is that, it just seems like we're piecemealing this without all the recommended documents and then coming up with multifaceted solutions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I concur that I think it's a good strategy to look at planting grow vines and what have you, and it has another effect to mitigate graffiti. I think it's a huge problem in 87 and 85 for sure, and I think that Caltrans could take a look at that as another mitigation method for graffiti abatement. And as far as the tree comment, we require people to plant trees, and I have to admit that our staff doesn't do a whole lot of following up until they plant the tree, and then we don't do a whole lot of following up. But then again, we do have 272 square miles and one arborist, and I just want to give you an idea of the monumental task. We have more trees than, I think, yeah, more trees than people potentially, and it is not. I personally have undertaken a lot of these mitigation trees and put them in my district, and some of them have died and nobody's replaced them, and so it's up to people to complain. It's a complaint-driven process, so if you put your complaint forward, we'll come out and fix it, but it's kind of like the tree that fell in the woods. We don't know that it fell, and until somebody tells us that it fell, unfortunately.
I did write a 4-page letter, so.
I think I probably
Several weeks ago.
One sentence with an address would have sufficed.
Okay, I think you guys could get together and figure that one out. Howard?
Sure, I got to go a little historic on people because there's a lot of people in the room who don't really fully comprehend what's going on within Saratoga. So this freeway cuts diagonally across our city. On a daily basis, 75% of our citizens are impacted by the noise of Highway 85. We are unique in that situation. Our distinguished colleague from Los Gatos, every single person who's in the sound shadow of 85 is already in the sound shadow of Highway 17. And it is not 20,000 people in your city that are affected on a daily basis. It's a much smaller number. And so you wouldn't see it. And for our new colleague in Cupertino, welcome. I would suggest you contact my Public Works Director, John Trebone, because he can fill in all the technical and engineering details. But when the freeway was opened, there was a huge impact upon my city, not just in terms of the noise, but in terms of the social impact. Dividing a city directly in half was a huge impact on our city. Its impacts, its wounds that our city is still feeling to this day. On the noise, the freeway was noisier than expected. It wasn't diamond cut grooves, it was grooved when they poured the cement. And so we actually engaged Caltrans and VTA right away, and they did a microgrinding project. The entire surface has been microground. That still did not meet the limits that our city thought were effective. There was a settlement at that time, and it kind of laid as a festering issue within the city. And to Rod's question, when we got to Measure B, my city is all for transportation, but we still feel like there is a lingering issue. We have more than one. Susan will appreciate this. If you look at the history of 85, there's an entire irrigation and landscaping project that was virtually abandoned on the freeway. What's there now is living by the grace of God, not by the engineering effort and money that was spent to make that work. And so we were very disappointed in the landscaping, not because we think it's the ultimate noise reduction. It changes the noise profile. It may absorb some, but because it totally trashed the aesthetics. And if you don't believe me, look at the stretch between Saratoga Avenue and Winchester Avenue. It's part of the ugliest section of the freeway, and it's because of a failed landscape plan, okay? Anyway, so where we went into Measure B, of all the issues within our city, this was a factor. And it was a compromise in the whole Measure B formation that there would be some money allocated to noise mitigation. This was necessary for my citizens. Again, on a daily basis, 20,000, over 20,000 of my 30,000 residents are impacted by the noise on Highway 85. It exceeds the levels we were promised. It exceeds the expectations of the citizens. One is sitting right here. If you don't believe me, go see Mir and go see his backyard. To have citizens who've shown up for 20 years on the exact same issue. Okay, it's not 20 years, but since the freeway's open. No, it's over 20 years now. This is a big deal within our city. And the history is one of trying to get this fixed. So it was a compromise in Measure B. It did satisfy a lot of the citizens within my city that we would actually try to do something. Now, in terms of the process, it's interesting. All these reports are posted online. You can find them all. They have been presented at this organization. They've been presented at the PAB. They've been presented at the TAC, and they've been presented at the board level. So everybody has seen the noise studies. They have seen the proposed solutions. And so while people can continue to come up with different ideas under different theories, we've been given a list, and the list has sort of potential for noise mitigation. That was the whole reason to do a pilot, was to put some stuff out and see what actually works. I get the fears on maintenance, but again, a lot of this freeway doesn't have trucks on it at all, which means the freeway can last virtually forever. I don't know what that means in terms of asphalt, but you do a pilot, you would know. I don't know if these caps, which from the engineering I know, disperse the sound differently, would they be effective? I don't know. That's why there's a pilot. That's why there's some amount of money allocated to this pilot. That's why the board moved forward. So again, first I caution people of trying to go back and reinvent the wheel since the dawn of time. The noise study was the first step in the process. It is available online. I suggest you look at it. The noise impacts on Saratoga have been documented extensively in the local press since the freeway was opened. And again, pull out a map and you tell me how Highway 85 crosses Cupertino or how Highway 85 crosses Campbell or Los Gatos. And you will see, comparing Saratoga, it is a much more dramatic impact within our city. And so that's why this issue bubbles up for my citizens. Now, don't get me wrong. We're one of the only cities I'm the only city of those that I just mentioned that actually has a transit center. And we work on a monthly basis to try and change what's going on with that transit center to improve utilization and to get more transit within our city. We are also huge fans of transit. But noise just impacts us disproportionately compared to every other city. So I don't want you to think that I'm Mr. Noise only, but you have to understand by the geography how important it is within my city. And it was part of the compromise that produced the ballot measure. And we're not talking about sucking up all the money. We're talking about a fraction to get through this pilot. What happens with phase 3? I don't know how the individual projects get done on phase 3, but it is entirely possible that individual cities with specific noise needs, once we have some approved solution, cities could potentially put up money to solve parts of the noise problems within their cities. So anyway, there is an over 20-year history on this. There isn't documented impact. There's been a lot of work that's gone on at the public works level. So Roger, I'll have John reach out to you, or you reach out to John, and John will give you an earful of noise on Highway 85 noise. It's an engineering problem, and there is no pure answer to it. And I just remind everybody, please be sensitive. This issue matters so much in our city that we fought through the whole Measure B part to get this as part of the language. It was a key factor for my citizens. So please don't dismiss this concern within my city.
Well, you are a strong advocate. Okay. I'm going to put this matter to... Yes, ma'am.
So when we're dealing with noise, it's tough because we end up in this mode of trying to deal with people who have concerns, and I'm not saying that they're not valid. We can knock down some of these, and then it's the next set, right? And it's the next set. So this kind of has this ability to kind of just be never ending. But the point I really want to make here is, as we move forward, the one thing that I would ask is, because this project has to do with quality of life for our residents along the corridors, okay, is that as we start moving things out into the public, when we start moving forward with some pilot project or whatever, that we translate everything into lay people's terms, into simple, plain language. So if you look at the study talks about the decibel level being 66 decibels or greater, and it talks about a noise reduction of 5 decibels. That's all wonderful for some minds, but for other minds, it's meaningless. So if we can use all the techniques that exist out there in terms of helping people understand what you hear at a 66 and what it means to drop it by 5, because when you look at some of that, again, what the average person can hear and detect, can people really notice a 5 decibel reduction? Because I'll tell you, if people can't notice a 5 decibel reduction, this is a lot of money, and we got the same issues. Howard's residents are still going to complain because 5 decibels didn't go far enough. So somehow we've got to figure out if we can move this and make the shift. Because again, the engineering report, great from an engineering point of view, but we really need to get it down to the lay people so we can really understand, are we getting the best bang for our buck? And is it going to make a difference for those of us who live along the corridor and actually use our ears to do this, which is very subjective? Okay? I want to make a difference if we're going to spend the money.
Okay.
One more.
Okay. Mr.
Thank
Sinks?
you. Yeah, I'm looking again at the process question here. I'm interested in knowing whether staff intends, or my colleagues are interested in, either one, in having some discussion about how much we allocate for this via the transportation improvements before we spend $10 million or commit to doing so.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, staff is willing to take direction from the committee with the firm understanding that the noise mitigation on Highway 85 is part of the Measure B ballot measure.
Yeah, I'm talking about the amount.
And that's why I would like to recommend that once we get the RFP and we get the dollars amount, then we have something to actually discuss and debate, and then that will give us a little more information, so we go from there. Will that be okay with?
So we would bring it back here
Absolutely,
to discuss
yeah.
after
Yes,
we have,
yeah.
after the RFP comes
You
in.
will have information from the RFP as to potential costs. I think at that point, you will have, yet again, another decision point where you can decide to move forward and how aggressive you want to be about it.
Thanks to both of you.
So-
That's great.
Now you are tasked with getting that RFP sooner than later. We would appreciate that. Okay? Any further? I'm going to go back to item number 5, the consent agenda, since that's our only action item, and do we have a quorum? So I'd like to take that matter under now.
I have to apologize for being late. It was a lot of traffic on Highway 85. I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Any discussion? Any public comment on the minutes? We will close public comment, bring it back to the board for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, passes unanimously. Okay, thank you. Now we will go on to item 7. Let me just to clarify, this is an informational item. So what I would like to do is that we're going to have a staff report, then we will take public comment after the staff report, and then we will bring it back to the board for questions and comments.
This item will be presented by Anna Berger, our Senior Transportation Planner.
Right. Good morning. This is an update on the alternatives analysis that our project team has been working on for the past few months. I will start by reminding everyone where we've been on this work. We did our first round of community engagement a while ago, followed up by a travel market analysis. I believe you should have in front of you an 11 by 17 handout that Member Miller referred to as the spaghetti diagram in the past that shows travel data, data that comes from mobile devices for travel patterns along the corridor. This was a request from our last meeting. That was a product of the travel market analysis. We have developed our alternatives, got direction on that at the last PAB meeting, and now we are working on the alternatives analysis. You will note that this slide is slightly different than information that is in your memo packet. At the time that we released the memo, we were optimistic that we could complete all of our analysis and come to the December 16th PAB meeting with a comparison matrix of all of the alternatives that could then inform PAB input and also kick off a round of public outreach. Since that time, we have seen some downgrades in our ability to do in-house transportation modeling. Some of our workers have been poached by other large companies in the Bay Area, and some serious health impacts have taken some folks out of the office. We have just recently learned that we do not have the bandwidth in-house to complete this analysis. So we're calling an audible, and we're doing our best to hire an external contractor to help us with this. Our best case scenario is a 1-month delay, possibly up to a 2 or 3 month delay. This is an issue that's been elevated to our general manager, and we are trying to figure out the fastest way to get this work complete. We know the Policy Advisory Board has an interest in the expedited completion of this study. After we release the comparison matrix, we think we can begin a round of community engagement that could also coincide with cities considering the various alternatives and coming back to us with official statements on which alternatives they prefer. At some point after that, we would agendize an action item for the Policy Advisory Board to make a recommendation to VTA's Board of Directors about a preferred alternative, and then a subsequent decision would be considered by VTA's board. At our last meeting, we heard 4 very clear things: that there were 3 alternatives that we should definitely evaluate. One is a no changes alternative, where absolutely nothing changes about Highway 85. An express lane alternative, one that we had been calling no project, but is the express lane project that our Silicon Valley Express Lanes program would have pursued in the corridor, and then a long transit lane alternative that goes all the way from 101 in Mountain View down to Highway 87. The Policy Advisory Board was very much looking for a bold way to improve transit travel speeds along the corridor. We also heard that for a transit alternative, 3 to 5 stations was appropriate. For our discussion today and the analysis we've done so far, we are looking at 4, and they are listed there: El Camino, Stevens Creek, Saratoga, and Bascom. Of those 3 ideas, 3 directives we got from the Policy Advisory Board, our team has been thinking very creatively about how to implement them, and they've actually expanded that to 10 alternatives that we will discuss here. Many of them are small variations on the various concepts, and I recognize that seems like a major growth in the scope of this project. And the reason we are proposing to include them is because in an alternatives analysis, you have a dual responsibility to evaluate the things that you're interested in pursuing, as well as other reasonable alternatives. You can imagine if there's community interest to build a subway project, but other options might be viable. If we only study subways, at some point in the future, someone will call out the validity of our analysis for its incompleteness. So we are trying to be complete so that we don't have to go back and do any work again, and that gives greater validity to the ultimate recommendation by this board. So I'm going to talk first about physical changes along the corridor. You have a handout, it's attachment A, it's an 8.5 by 11, about 10 pages long, that shows the physical changes. We are also going to talk at a later point in this presentation about the transit routing options that we're looking at on the corridor. These go together, but I'm going to discuss them one at a time. Here is our no changes alternative. To read this graphic, this is a very simplified schematic of the highway. The third of the corridor on the left is between 101 and Mountain View and 280. The middle is between 280 and 87, and the side on the right is the south of 87 portion. So no changes, pretty clear. We are looking into an HOV to express lane conversion on the corridor, but one that does not build an additional lane between 280 and 87. The thought here is that if, say, a transit alternative didn't work out or didn't seem to be wanted to be pursued by the board, this would still preserve that right-of-way for the future, for perhaps a new technology or a new concept or change in the operational or technical design of a transit service to go in there. We are considering the Express Lanes project, which has been on the books for a while. We're also considering a long express lane project, and this goes hand in hand with the next alternative that I will forward to, which is the long transit lane. If we build a long transit lane from 101 in Mountain View to Highway 87, it is virtually the same amount of engineering and physical changes to the roadway as a long express lane. And in the sense for evaluating reasonable alternatives, we think this alternative 2.2 makes sense to look at least to analyze and put in with the package of others. There's our long transit lane along the median. Our design team has come up with a few different ideas for a long transit lane. Our option 3.2 is locating it on the right side of the roadway. If we are going to have impacts we might run into in the median, perhaps a right side lane could work. We're also looking at a hybrid approach where the transit lane is located in the median, in the middle portion of the freeway, where we know we have a good amount of unused right-of-way where the buses can travel quickly, and then, oh, thank you, and then crossing over to the other side of the freeway. It's that northern portion of Highway 85 where we see the greatest volumes of shuttles. And we're thinking that there are many entering and exiting the corridor in that area, and a right transit lane may be valuable for flexibility of operations. It may also be something that could have a lower capital cost in the end. We are, of course, wary that forcing a bus to merge across traffic has some trade-offs. But for completeness of analysis, we think this would be a worthwhile thing to consider. I've brought back the short transit lane alternative. This was one that the PAB criticized as being insufficiently bold at our last meeting. The reality is that if we look at the long transit lane in the median, we'll have done all the work to put together the metrics on this one, and we think it can be included at a very low level of effort for our team. I want to talk about two more alternatives that we're considering. Bus on shoulders has been brought up a number of times by the Policy Advisory Board, and I want to give some specific definition to what that is and what the appeal of that might be, and as well as the drawbacks. It's officially referred to as part-time bus on shoulder operations. It's limited to approved users, which could be VTA Transit, which could be corporate shuttles, provided that the training is there. It's also available for emergency vehicles and disabled vehicles. And in some cases, there are speed limitations put on that, whether it's cannot exceed adjacent traffic by so much or whether there is a set speed limit. Now, the pros here are that you're sort of borrowing space rather than building new space. While you would have to do some work to beef up the pavement in that section due to the new traffic volume and heavy vehicles that will be on it, it might have lower right-of-way needs in the end. Of course, the cons are that it's simply not as wonderful to travel down than a dedicated transit lane. This is also something that isn't quite standard yet. Some agencies are piloting bus-on-shoulder operations. We know that we've had a lot of conversations with our member or partner agency, Caltrans, to explore the validity of this option. So we're considering these to be alternatives worth looking at, but some that are going to be strongly informed by conversations we intend to have with Caltrans in the future on this. So we have a median bus-on-shoulder concept, very similar to the median transit lane, except we're using the shoulder and not using a dedicated lane, and then a right side shoulder. So those are the 10 physical alternatives. I want to talk about the transit service options. And this is an area where we're going somewhat deep in our analysis, looking at multiple combinations. We want to figure out what makes the most valid transit service. So there are 3 routing combinations that our team has put together. One that I've just called direct routing involves traveling only along the corridor, serving those 4 stations along the way, as well as the Mountain View Caltrain Center and the Ohlone Chenoweth Station. People who use the corridor for transit would have to access at these stations. We've also been asked by the PAB to look at going beyond the freeway, extending north of 101 on the northern end and then south of 101 on the southern end. The idea being that we can expand the catchment area and utility of the service by reaching out to more people, although that'll probably mean a slower overall travel time for the entire route. And the last version, which I'm calling deviations, sees the transit service getting off the corridor at key points to go to places that we see as being major attractors or likely destinations, or places where strong transit connections are made. This, of course, comes with the longest overall travel time because it's the least direct, but it can expand the access of the service to more people. And it may be that one of these isn't the right answer, but some combination of them, perhaps a direct overlaid with a deviations. When we do our modeling analysis, we'll be able to see how they compare and what the access and speed and ridership trade-offs are. Not all of these 3 ideas will work for every alternative. The deviations idea really works best for instances where the bus would be using the right lane or right shoulder of the corridor. For the other alternatives, the other 2, the direct and the beyond the freeway options are available to us. We're also going to be looking at a few different spans of service, all-day service and peak period service, to see if we have a market that can support all-day service or whether we're best set targeting just the peak period when we think transit will be most time competitive against automobile travel speeds. And the frequency of service to be modeled is something that will be informed by a funding analysis that we have yet to complete. We want to make sure that we're looking at a level of service that can be reasonably funded in the future. I'm going to cycle through a few graphics of designs that our team has put together, and the point here isn't to pick apart these designs and get very specific on what we like and don't like about them. I just want to show you the level of complexity and creativity and scale that our team is considering. I'm going to show you 3 examples from El Camino Real and how different approaches are being taken here. First note that El Camino Real at 85 is a very old interchange. We have what are called clover ramps that look like a clover if you count all 4 petals there. Those, I think, were an appealing design decades ago, but have now fallen largely out of favor. The limited merging space can be especially harrowing at certain times of day when vehicles are going at high speeds. And we see the state really transitioning to this longer off-ramp that goes to a signal at each end. And so that would be within the scope of changes of this effort. And it actually could improve issues relating to friction and slow down of vehicles along the corridor. In this instance, our design team has done something very creative, which is to put a reversible bus lane going up to the El Camino grade on Highway 85. And if I can show an example from Seattle that's a little bit different, they're actually proposing, in this example, to cantilever the stations out over lanes, effectively making space where there isn't space now. An idea that was much more creative than anything I came up with before they joined the team here, and potentially allowing for very streamlined median transit lane operations. Another option would be to treat this like the light rail stations on Highway 87, like Virginia Street Station, where we have split platforms. So This creates enough room for the bus to serve a station and also creates a passing lane for buses that may not want to stop there, whether it's an express route or a private shuttle. Does not have to leave the transit lane if there is a stopped vehicle or vehicle making a stop there. And the last, and this is my favorite, is a crossover station concept. Buses will come along into what will be a reversible overhead ramp. In the peak direction, the bus would use the median station. In the off-peak direction, it would use a side station. And I'll show you an example here from Minneapolis on I-35. You can see perhaps by the tire patterns how the buses are crossing over. And that's because the door-to-board is on the right side of the bus, so it needs to move to the left side of the roadway to go through. An example here would be in the white arrows, a bus that is making a stop, that it pulls into the station. But a bus that is skipping that stop could be shown in the yellow arrows, bypassing it, traveling at full speed. A very creative solution that works due to the peaked directional nature of this travel market in this corridor. Lastly, an engineering concept that Mountain View has asked us to explore, which is a median ramp to Evelyn Avenue, so that shuttles and buses accessing the transit center could have a much simpler way of getting over there. In this example, a ramp actually takes the buses down below the freeway grade and puts it against the right side exit lane. This is one of multiple designs that our team has looked at, and I think the one that we favor at the moment. So just to talk about some work ahead, we obviously have some conversations to have with Caltrans. Every single transit lane alternative and the bus on shoulder options are in some ways non-standard. And Caltrans does allow a design exceptions process that we would have to go through to get any of these completed. We think that all of the design exceptions that we are seeking or would seek would be reasonable. There's precedent in other parts of the state where such treatments have been given, but this is brand new for this corridor, and we would need to go through that analysis. We're also going to be reaching out to employers. We tried to do this with very minimal success to understand where their routes go and what ridership they have. In this case, we're going to be sharing these concepts that we have and asking them, how does this work for the type of operations you have? Is there a station that you definitely would use or would not use? Is there an on-ramp that has problems that we need to address with this type of project? Trying to get that sort of feedback that can inform the design without being overly specific or getting into a territory where they might feel they want to keep their information private. I mentioned before that we have an expected delay with our transportation modeling, but we'll also be doing a funding analysis on the capital side and operational side. Our engineering team will figure out some capital cost estimates, and we will see whether that can be accommodated within the expected $350 million, or whether outside funding might be needed and what sort of shot we might have in a competitive funding process. We'll be looking at constructability. Now, everything is constructible, but that construction sometimes can have small impacts to existing travel or big impacts, and that'll be something to have in mind as we evaluate each alternative. And we'll do a high-level environmental analysis, really to see if there are any things that could become large issues in the future. Of particular concern is the adjacent Stevens Creek and Stevens Creek Trail. That could be an area where we have impacts. Ultimately, all of this will be put together in an alternatives matrix for the Policy Advisory Board to consider and for the public to also evaluate. So revisiting our earlier slide, we are going to do our best to have a deliverable for you in January. Recognize that our next scheduled PAB meeting is December 16th, and I'd hope to have the comparison alternatives matrix at that point. We may not have much to share with you in December, so we may be looking to reschedule this meeting to sometime in January. Then we'll pursue community engagement and then let the political process take over advocating for a particular or set of designs. And that's my last slide. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to open it up to the public, then we'll bring it back to the board. So I have a card for Chris for comments or questions. Chris? Or
Hi, sorry, I thought you said Chris Collins.
No.
My name's Chris Corral. I'm with the City of Cupertino. I just wanted to, I'm a senior transit and transportation planner for the city. I wanted to start by thanking Adam and his team for fleshing out the transit lane alternative, which Cupertino is a big supporter of. I just wanted to reiterate our support for that, this concept. I think it's important that if this is an alternative that's pursued, that the construction and engineering be such that it's not essentially an express lane, that there's physical separation. I think it's important for people along that will be driving and stuck in traffic along this corridor to see a great difference in speed. And I think it's important that there's a physical construction that backs that up. I like all of the different suggestions for the station designs. I think it's important also that there are no deviations when it comes to the stations, so that it functions more like a train, like Caltrain. I think I can imagine this sort of being like a spur of Caltrain in a way, and I think that would be most attractive to people that are commuting through this corridor, especially now as the MTC is thinking about really big ideas for the Bay Area. I think it's important we think 20 years down the road so that users of this corridor will think, wow, they really were thinking about the future and not end up with express lanes, which may meet the needs currently, but most likely will not long into the future. So thanks to Adam, and we look forward to seeing this fleshed out a little bit more.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, we have Stephen Levine. I got that correct?
Thank you. I'd like to thank Mr. Berger for his presentation, but I'd like to bring up a number of points. There's basically a little demand in this corridor for transit, and you all know that. You just don't want to believe it. BTA tried 185 express bus from South County using the corridor, going up to your industrial areas, a failure, being discontinued. The Almond Light rail line, which is supposed to serve South San Jose, being discontinued. No one wants to use light rail down there. Just like in your communities along the corridor, most people in your communities do not get up and use transit. They want to drive their own cars, period. VTA is cutting bus service everywhere, so if you're talking about running more transit service, where are you going to get it from? What service are you going to cut in what other part of the county, which is already down to bare bones in many other places in this county already? You don't need to build any costly infrastructure for stations. I agree with the previous comment. You don't need to divert from the corridor. You just need to build lanes and see what uses those lanes. In terms of connectivity, Caltrans has express lane projects all over the Bay Area. If you have express lanes, they'll tie into other things. If you're just looking at the 85 corridor as a thing of its own, you're making a mistake because that ties into other corridors that will have express lanes on them. I speak as a transit user, which I know probably basically none of you are, because most people here aren't. Stations on a freeway do not work very well. They imply long walks to get to where you're going next. There's safety and security issues for a lot of people that want to use them. You got to go up and down stairs. You got to go through tunnels, and then where are you going to wind up? So are you going to build a lot of big park and ride lots for people to use? I know probably some of you don't want to think about that. The transit service you're going to have intersecting those is pretty poor. Thank you.
Thank you. Interested citizen.
Heavy.
No, I guess not.
Well, I'm about to change my last name, but that's another story. Then one day you're going to find out how I really am. I'm not a LeBron. Now, so which options? I suggest we actually start with the shoulder for transit to start with. And that would be similar to what we're doing on Montague Expressways, the HOV lanes on the right. But you could move this lane to the median later date. And once again, this is where smart freeways come in, because you can dynamically change the lanes on the fly, based on what you're trying to do. Phasing should be prioritized based on expected improvements in traffic. So I would not necessarily say we have to do the southbound and the northbound sections at the same time. it basically depends on what's happening in the southbound, northbound direction. I mean, at the same location in both directions. One thing that's not being studied is express service in the median and local service in the shoulder. That would be very similar to Caltrain Baby Bullets, where you have passing tracks down the middle, and then you've got station tracks on the side. With regards to stations, the corporate shuttles have built an incredible network out there, and they're moving tens of thousands of people every day without a single change to the existing infrastructure. They went and studied it, decided what worked for them, and what's happening here? And took it from there. And we really missed out on not tracking them like San Francisco it is, because we could have gained some tremendous business intelligence. Virginia Station was mentioned. I suggest you actually look at the ridership, because the light rail doesn't stop in Virginia anymore, so I don't even understand why we built any of that stuff. Actually, one day I was on a train that did slow down in Virginia and hit the platform at 55. One last point, Ohlone Chenoweth, we have an opportunity of using the abandoned Almaden line, and actually from Ohlone Chenoweth, the existing station, show up in the median of the freeway. Thank you.
Thank you. Heidi? Heidi's next.
Thank you for remembering my name. That's the first time I haven't been that candidate. I'm Heidi Owens. I'm candidate for Los Gatos Town Council, and I have a few different comments. One is, long-term, we need to get people out of cars into trains, really, not just buses, but trains. So I'd like you to consider Basona Junction as a potential hub for future train to bus to car traffic. And it was mentioned in one of the alternatives, but sort of as a little 10-millimeter line. So, as you deliberate moving forward, please consider that to be a really critical point for traffic to transfer. Two is we need to consider tiered rate plans for the buses. You've got the Google, Facebook buses. They should pay a really high premium because they can afford it and because they're responsible for the growth and the congestion that we're experiencing overall. They need to contribute more. But also small business transit operators. We could have companies that want to come in and operate buses for the smaller companies. So those need to have a lower rate plan. And then nonprofit or tour bus operators for tourists coming into town. So whatever rate plans we do for the bus lanes, please make sure it's a little more complex. It's not just a simple bus rate. And then three, consider adding, in addition to disabled traffic for the express lane, senior traffic. 30% of Los Gatos residents will be senior citizens by 2020. And I know my parents have sore backs. They can't sit in a car for a long time. And also the working age is increasing to an even higher age. So we have seniors who are trying to commute to work. Just consider the idea of a senior express lane. I think those are all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And Roger.
All right.
Will be our last speaker.
Roger Lee, City of Cupertino. I think anything that can be time competitive is very important. So whatever improvements that are needed at the 4 or 5 stations that you're proposing, that do that to where the transit buses or corporate shuttles have the opportunity to get through there quickly. Keeping it separated is very important, not just for the visual, so that people can see that there's better options for them, but also for whether it's VTA buses or the corporate shuttle buses, that it is more time competitive for them as well. And with the corporate shuttles, there's a lot of opportunities for those corporations to participate in the cost of these improvements. They want to move their employees quickly. This infrastructure can help them, so involving them early in the conversation as to what would work for them the best, I think is not something to have any, put the right thought into that. I think that's what I wanted to cover. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further public input, we will bring it back to the board here, and I think Howard Miller would like to speak.
Yeah, I apologize to my fellow board members. I do have to leave, so I'll make 2 comments. First, for Heidi, where it said disabled, that was cars that broke down. They could block the lane. That was what the report was talking about. For us, I think the list of options that staff has come up with, we should investigate all of them. I think that seemed like a reasonable mix, and a lot of the justification for some of the alternatives, which we may not actually favor, is that we're 95% of the way there, so let's just make sure we get the rest of the blanks filled in. And as for the schedule, I probably share everybody's heartache that we've been at this for 3 years, but I see the light at the end of the tunnel. I appreciate the staff turnover at VTA and all speed in moving forward. And again, I want to apologize to my fellow board members and members of the public, but I'm double booked and I will be leaving us right now. Thank you.
Thank you for your brevity. And
Yeah,
okay.
give me at the end of the meeting, Tom.
Okay. Any other comments from Johnny Camus?
I concur with his comments, and I'm actually, I think we should investigate all these options. Maybe not the do-nothing option, but all the options. I especially like the fact that you're going to go to employers, and I think we can get a good sense of what they think the good solutions are. And if they volunteer to give us money to help with those solutions, fantastic. I'm all in favor of that. The option that seems interesting to me, it wasn't specifically called out, so I don't. At the risk of adding one more, complication here, is there any way you can have like use the shoulder where you can use the shoulder and use the extra width of because I know that we have enough width between 87 and 280. We have enough width to put a lane without using the shoulder, and so use the extra median where you can, and then use the shoulder to extend it the rest of the way to pass from 280 to 101. I think it would help us solve a lot more problems more efficiently. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that idea. The nice thing about this freeway having sort of 3 distinct corridors is that it gives us the ability to mix and match.
Yeah.
We may like part of 2A and part of 3B, and that becomes the recommendation to the Policy Advisory Board. So I think we'll get there in all of our analysis. We'll have the metrics to evaluate that idea.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I know that we're not voting on anything but today, and I appreciate the discussion and the direction you're going here. Thanks.
Board Member Bruins?
Yeah, I support everything that you have put before us, and I just want to take a moment to thank staff for the creative thought process and also being able to put very simply, the slide deck I thought was quite an impressive slide deck when you can actually show us some of these examples and such. I really think, I'm going to look at my colleagues, I think we've come a long way. Then yes, we can always be frustrated because we're always impatient about a lot of things, but things move at the pace of government, right? However, I would hope that we all look at the real positive thing, which is I think we have staff working really hard, and I think they've heard us loud and clear in terms of what we're, trying to get somewhat creative here, and I think you guys are just rocking this right now. So stay the course, and let's keep this going. These are pretty exciting approaches on how we can do this, and I like the variations of all 10. It makes sense to do it now and not call it to question later.
Thank you. Director Sinks.
Yeah, I will echo prior comments. I'm impressed if we flip up to some of these pictures from Mountain View.
Of course.
Who came up with these? And then the other one at El Camino, was this Mountain View staff or VTA staff, or did you collaborate on these? I mean,
When we were shopping our initial alternatives around and asking cities what they liked and did not like, this was an idea that came out of Mountain View staff, and it's something that.
And then you flushed it out more, it sounds
Right.
like. Well, did you get any comments from my city staff?
Envy.
Okay, so you don't have to answer that. But I am nearly 100% sure that my city staff will have ideas too. I have to say, if we look, and then we look at the one from Minneapolis. I grew up in Minneapolis. I know I-35, and can you flip to that one? Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of creative thinking we need. I guess what happens here is this tail funnels down to one lane. If I was to look far to the left or far to the right.
In this instance, it's a 2-lane median facility. They just
Okay.
happen to cross over, so you can board through the right side doors at the median platform.
Right, okay. So you do have a lane in each direction.
In this case, yes.
One lane in each direction through the duration, yeah. I think, you know, if we think about the fact that I like the reversible lane. I do think that if we look 20 years out, we really could be looking at traffic in 2 directions, right? So coming up with solutions that don't preclude that would be good. I mean, buses can return, of course, in any normal lane. So that's one option too. But if, you know, in the future we really build the housing we need in our area, which includes that vast portion of South San Jose where Johnny is, and all of our cities, you know, I think we hopefully will build ridership to the point where we have an effective two-way solution, while recognizing today that we have a problem that is primarily going northbound in the mornings and southbound in afternoon. So I appreciate all the thinking that goes into this. I understand we'll look at all these alternatives. I obviously have an interest in what I think we had a majority of PAB members express interest in last time, which is a transit-only lane with limited stops. So I think that's your 3-1. And whether it has, in fact, all of those or not, I think a limited number really does make sense. I'm surely interested in, understanding how much money it's going to take to do this. My belief is when we look at these kinds of improvements that, as Chris Correa said, allow our vehicles to keep moving to make the transit time competitive, we're going to find we're going to need more than 350 and minus 10 or whatever it's going to be for the noise. I get that. We're going to do the noise too, right? But I would really appreciate understanding what that looks like and then seeing if we can entice, beg, borrow, or I won't say the other word, get our major employers in on the conversation. I will note that we have been meeting for 3 years, and while they've occasionally shown up and sat in the audience, they're just not anywhere to be found on this in helping further the conversation. We tried to get them to give us data so we could get better market rate analysis. We got nowhere on that. We've asked if and expressed our interest in a public-private partnership. We've asked for what they would find serviceable. At the end of the day, my city council has weighed in, and we think it important that we get a service subsidized by private employers, either through capital improvements in the corridor or in fees to use this facility that would allow us to move the entire public. Because at this point, we're losing our teachers, we're losing our service workers. They can't afford to live in our communities right now, and we need to get them all the way north, past Cupertino to Mountain View. We cannot fail in this project, in my view, to stop with a simple answer where we have the right-of-way and the median and only get to Cupertino. What that would do is create a big bottleneck, and we talked about that last time, so I won't reiterate. But I think we need to get this thing all the way north to Mountain View to establish an effective connection to Caltrain for people who, need that, quite frankly, the best transit system we have on the peninsula and will for a long, long time. So I appreciate my colleagues up here coming together. I appreciate what staff has done and hope we really can make a difference in moving this forward before we're all turned out. Thank you.
Okay. Susan? Okay, that was it? Okay. Yeah, this is exciting.
Mr. Chair.
Oh,
Could I just real quickly just say that in response to some of Member Sink's comments, that we have been working we've been working with employers. And I just want to acknowledge that Jason Baker from the Silicon Valley leadership is in the audience today, and he was kind enough to meet with Adam and I last week, and is committed to helping us get some of that information that you've been talking about that we have had some difficulty getting. We've also been working on a new express bus proposal on a separate matter, and many employers have been much more receptive to listening to us and working with us. So we certainly agree with everything you had mentioned a moment ago in terms of the difficulty working with them, but just want to acknowledge Jason and some of the employers that have been working a little more closely with us now than they have in the past.
I would love to hear from them. I love their intention, and now we need to have an effective conversation because frankly, time's running out, right? If we're going to make a decision in early 2020, either they're in with us and really going to work with us intensively on finding solutions, or we're going to have to go figure out something else. And so that's where I am. And no, believe me, almost nothing more important than having those conversations and figuring out something that will work for everybody. But if we, at the end of the day, can't get a public transit service in this corridor that's sustainable and funded through operations on an ongoing basis, my city's not going to have much interest in any of this. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and glad to see Jason Baker there. I mean, he's going to, he knows where we stand on putting in their, corporations putting their money where their concerns are. Just a side note, I was mentioning to Scott and Jim Saturday, I was sitting with Jim Wonderman from Bay City and Russell Hancock, and we were having a three-way conversation about transportation and corporate America coming up with helping out. So that was a serendipitous meeting, so that was good. You know, the San Jose Mercury, and I brought out the Sunday paper about transit and how we have to all connect, and they must run an article at least every other week about the drive to connect. And I'm looking at this SR 85 corridor, and this is one of those areas that we need to really push technology, being innovative, and I think so far we are. I mean, express lanes to me are not innovative. They're sort of, here's the money, do it, boom. But we're not really moving large bodies that we wanted to. And the connection is, we're talking to 101 North. Well, maybe that transit lane will continue throughout the area or go down 237 because there's really no mass transit along those lines. And so this approach of what we're doing is really important, and I appreciate the staff working on it because they know how dedicated and the founding members of this committee have been working on getting this moving forward, and we do like to get this in front of the VTA board before the end of the year. We were also talking about the express buses and also on the VTA, the CMP, the Congestion Management Projects and Program. We were also talking about the express buses, and to the point where people aren't taking the express buses because they're sitting in traffic and it's much more convenient for them to sit in their car and they have their music and so forth. So once we get this dedicated transit lane, which again, I like Mr. Kama said and Rod Singh says, quickest, fastest. I think Ms. Bruins constantly says it, quicker, faster, easier. Even if there are no stops, no stations, we just got to keep moving forward, and it's really good to see that. With the funding deal, I know that funding also goes to labor, and so we're working things for people that VTA has changed some of its labor agreements, and that therefore make it more cost-effective to be running certain buses at peak times. So that's always a great idea. And then this conversation is, I said in the paper, but this issue of faster Bay Area is coming up, and this is an opportune time to make everybody start thinking about connections and routes and corridors. And that's very important because a lot of times we still see every city, every county doing their little project, and we're not looking at the big corridor. And that's why this group hopefully will emphasize that here's a corridor that can go from Monterey or San Benito or Los Banos, and if we're looking positive and looking for you to go up to past San Jose to Oakland and to San Francisco, and here's the start of something that could be great for the area. That's a huge corridor that's going to move thousands of people tens of thousands of people. And I'm just still reading that along 237 in North Bayshore, Facebook is adding another 5,000. Google's going to be adding thousands. And 237 is an area that is being under-addressed for transportation. And hopefully we can take the lessons learned here on SR 85 and move it to 237 and move that forward. So that's great. So I'm all in favor of all this. I know when we talk about funding that sort of, we've just had an update on BART, and they're going to go out for bonding. So with this 35, how do we compete with BART for money? Are we also going to go for bonding for this? Is this going to be something that's on the plate, but 10 years down the line, or can we get this moving quicker than other projects?
I think the easy answer to that is the projects that are ready to go and have public support will have first call on the money as we move forward. The ballot measure is very specific about how much money the BART project can get under all circumstances. So I would not be as concerned about that as making sure that we have a report back to you that impartially provides you analysis of the various options, and that you can make a decision on which ones to recommend to the board, and we can move it forward.
Okay. And my last, one other comment. So we had these stops. I know Mountain View has been very interactive with you guys on how to, El Camino or Evelyn. Have you reached out to these other cities to say, okay, if there was going to be a stop at those cities, how would it be the best way to integrate our goal of faster, quicker, and to address getting people on?
I don't think we put it out there like which city would like which stop where. At this point, we're doing a high-level alternatives analysis that precedes getting into the project stage. So we're really testing out concepts. So whether the station ends up being at Bascom or Winchester may not actually matter that much at this high level. We're just trying to see what ideas are viable. That said, if there is a city that feels that there's an element that needs to be included, I'm happy to meet with them and discuss that, much the way that Mountain View discussed the Evelyn ramp to us. We're seeing that as sort of a possible project element, sort of an a la carte item to the project. And if there are others that we should be considering, we can do that.
Yeah, I mean, no offense to my great staff, I'd rather just see one. Evelyn or El Camino. I mean, not to say others, I wasn't going that way. But one, because again, people want to get on and off. Okay, that will close those comments. Thank you for everybody. So we do have any announcements from any of our board members? Yes, ma'am.
I would like to extend an invitation to everybody to attend the City of Campbell's 2019 State of the City Address presented by Honorable Mayor Rich Waterman. It is this Thursday, the 26th, at our Orchard City Banquet Hall on 1 West Campbell Avenue at 6 p.m. Light refreshments will be provided. Please come and hear about all the exciting things in Campbell.
Forgive me, but I didn't allow Nick to comment on his part in seeing the future and collaborating with us on SR 85. You have any comments?
Thank you so much. Actually, you know what? I want to echo District Director Tony Taveras when he came January, I believe, 10, and he gave a speech to VTA Board of Directors. Caltrans, I recognized it took me also 2.5 hours to get from San Leandro to down here. So there is a regional transportation issue that Caltrans are recognizing and open for any innovation to done work. So he committed to be part of any innovation, any solution for any traffic in the region, and we will go as fast as a region.
Thank you. And we appreciate you being here today. It's good to be able to let you pass that on to your people and for us to see it, and if we have any questions, and that you show your concern and appreciation for what's being done by our VTA staff in the community. Okay, with that being said, I adjourn the meeting. Thank you all, and we got here out of time.